The Daily Habits of Successful Americans You Can Start Today. The 5 a.m. Club. A story about the daily habits of successful Americans. The body was found at dawn. Detective Sarah Mitchell of the Chicago Police Department stood at the edge of Lake Michigan, her breath misting in the November air, staring at the pale figure washed up against the breakwater. The sky was bleeding pink and orange over the John Hancock Center, and somewhere in Lincoln Park, runners were already hitting the lakefront trail. But Sarah wasn't thinking about the dead man. Not really. She was thinking about the note in his pocket. 5 a.m. Navy Pier. Don't be late. J. Sarah. Her partner, Marcus Chen, appeared beside her, coffee in hand. Medical examiner says drowning, but there's bruising on the wrists. Could be homicide made to look like an accident. Sarah nodded absently, her dark eyes fixed on the horizon. She'd seen this man before, 3 weeks ago at a TEDx event in the Loop. He'd been in the audience, taking notes with feverish intensity, while a woman on stage spoke about morning routines and million-dollar habits. His name was David Holloway, 42 years old, former executive at a tech startup in Austin, Texas, now living in a studio apartment in Wicker Park, working as a barista at a coffee shop on Milwaukee Avenue. And according to his phone records, he'd been meeting someone every morning at 5 a.m. for the past month. Marcus, Sarah said slowly, do you know what successful people do at 5 a.m.? Her partner blinked. Sleep? No, Sarah said, pulling her coat tighter against the wind. They change their lives. Chapter 1. The Morning That Changed Everything. 3 weeks earlier, David Holloway had been standing on the edge of his own destruction. His startup, an app called Harvest that connected urban farmers with restaurants in cities like Portland, Denver, and Nashville, had imploded 6 months prior. The investors from Silicon Valley had pulled out. His co-founder had taken the intellectual property and fled to Miami. David had driven his Tesla from Austin to Chicago in a 3-day blur of energy drinks and self-loathing, arriving with $847 in his checking account and a resume that screamed, failed entrepreneur. The studio apartment in Wicker Park smelled like the previous tenant's cat and regret. David slept until noon, ordered Thai food from a place on Division Street, and binge-watched true crime documentaries until 3 a.m. He told himself he was processing. He told himself he was recalibrating. He was dying by inches. Then came the Tuesday that shattered everything. David had woken at 2 p.m. to find his electricity shut off. The Chicago winter was pressing against his single-pane windows, and his breath clouded the air. He sat in the dark, wrapped in a blanket from his college days at the University of Michigan, and realized something terrifying. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt hope. His phone buzzed. A notification from Meetup.com, a group called Chicago Sunrise Society, was gathering at North Avenue Beach at 5:30 a.m. the next morning. The description read, "Join successful professionals, entrepreneurs, and dreamers who believe the first hour determines the rest of your life. No excuses, no exceptions, just results." David almost deleted it, but something, maybe the cold, maybe the darkness, maybe the ghost of the man he used to be, made him tap join instead. That night he didn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching snow begin to fall over the Chicago skyline, and wondered what kind of person voluntarily wakes up before the sun. At 4:15 a.m., he laced up his running shoes. At 4:15 a.m., he laced up his running shoes. Chapter 2. The Woman at the Water's Edge. The lakefront trail was deserted except for a lone figure standing at the water's edge, silhouetted against the pre-dawn darkness. David approached cautiously, his heart hammering not from exertion, but from the raw strangeness of being awake while the city slept. The figure turned. A woman in her mid-30s, wearing a North Face jacket and running tights, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She held a thermos of coffee and regarded him with eyes that seemed to see straight through his excuses. "You're late," she said. "It's 4:58, David protested. "Successful people are early," she replied. "My name is Julia Brennan. Welcome to the 5 a.m. club." Julia Brennan. The name rang a bell. David had seen her face on billboards along the Kennedy Expressway, on the cover of Chicago Magazine's 40 Under 40 issue. She was the founder of Ascend, a corporate wellness company headquartered in the Merchandise Mart that had gone from a $5,000 investment to a $40 million valuation in 4 years. She lived in a penthouse in the Gold Coast, spoke at conferences from New York to Los Angeles, and had been profiled by Forbes, Fast Company, and Oprah's network. And here she was, standing on a frozen beach in Chicago at 5 a.m., waiting for strangers to change their lives. "Why are you doing this?" David asked. Julia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Because someone did it for me once. Because at 5 a.m., the world is quiet enough to hear yourself think. Because every successful American I know, from the hedge fund managers on Wall Street to the organic farmers in Vermont, shares one thing in common: they own their mornings." She gestured for him to follow, and they began walking along the shoreline, the city skyline beginning to glow with the first hints of sunrise. "Most people wake up reacting," Julia continued. "Their alarm goes off, they grab their phone, they check emails and Instagram and the news. They're immediately in defensive mode, responding to other people's demands, other people's emergencies. By 9 a.m., they're exhausted, and they haven't even started their own work." David thought of his own mornings, if you could call them that. The scrolling, the anxiety, the endless notifications from people who wanted something from him. "Successful Americans," Julia said. "They do the opposite. They wake up with intention. They spend the first hour of their day on offense, not defense. They read, they meditate, they exercise, they plan. They do the things that matter before the world can interrupt them. They reached the North Avenue Beach House, closed for the season, its Art Deco architecture ghostly in the half-light. Julia turned to face him, and for the first time, David saw something vulnerable beneath her polished exterior. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "For the next 30 days, you meet me here at 5 a.m. No excuses, no exceptions. I'll teach you the habits that built my company, that built Apple, that built Amazon, that built every great American success story. But you have to show up, because showing up is 80% of everything." David looked at the woman before him, this titan of industry standing on a frozen beach, offering him a lifeline he didn't deserve. He thought of the electricity bill he couldn't pay, the investors who'd laughed him out of rooms, the co-founder who'd betrayed him. He thought of the man he'd been in Austin, full of swagger and certainty, and how far he'd fallen. "Why me?" he asked. Julia was quiet for a long moment. The sun was breaking over Lake Michigan now, turning the water to liquid gold, painting the sky in strokes of amber and rose. In the distance, a freight train rumbled along the metro tracks, and somewhere in Old Town, a bakery was opening its doors for the first customers of the day. "Because," she said softly, "I see myself in you. And because I know what it's like to be so lost that you forget who you are. I know what it's like to need someone to believe in you before you can believe in yourself." She handed him a small notebook. On the cover, in her elegant handwriting, were the words, "The Daily Habits of Successful Americans." "Day 1, she said. "Write down 3 things you're grateful for. Then write down the one thing that, if you accomplished it today, would make everything else worthwhile. Then go run 2 miles. I'll see you tomorrow." She turned and jogged away, her figure growing smaller against the vast expanse of lake and sky, leaving David alone with the sunrise and a notebook full of possibilities. Chapter 3: The 30 Days. What happened over the next month would change David's life forever, but not in the way he expected. The habits were deceptively simple. Julia called them the 5 pillars, and she introduced them one by one, each building on the last. Pillar 1: The Sacred Hour. From 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., Julia explained on day 3 as they stretched on the grass near Belmont Harbor. "This time belongs to you and you alone. No phone, no email, no news, just you and your growth. Read something that challenges you. Write something that clarifies your thinking. Move your body. Pray, if that's your thing. Meditate, if it's not. But make this hour non-negotiable." David started with 10 minutes of journaling, 20 minutes of reading. Julia recommended biographies of Americans who'd overcome adversity, Oprah Winfrey, Abraham Lincoln, Howard Schultz, and 30 minutes of running along the lakefront. By week 2, he noticed something strange. He wasn't dreading the alarm anymore. He was looking forward to it. Pillar 2. Deep work blocks. The most successful Americans don't multitask, Julia said on day 7 as they walked through Lincoln Park Zoo before it opened to the public, the animals stirring in their enclosures. They do deep work. 90-minute blocks of uninterrupted focus on the most important task. Turn off notifications. Close your door. Train your brain to go deep, and you'll accomplish in 3 hours what takes others 8. David applied this at his barista job with surprising results. He started using his breaks to sketch business ideas instead of scrolling social media. He began arriving early to plan his shift with intention. His manager, a woman named Rosa from Pilsen, noticed the change. "You seem different," she said one morning as David steamed milk with a precision he'd never had before. "Lighter. Like you remembered why you're here." Pillar 3. Strategic relationships. Success in America isn't a solo sport, Julia explained on day 12 over coffee at Intelligentsia in the Loop. It's built on relationships, but not networking, genuine connection. Send one thoughtful message every day to someone you admire. Offer value before you ask for anything. Build a tribe of people who challenge you, support you, and hold you accountable. David started reaching out to former colleagues, not to ask for jobs, but to ask how they were doing. He reconnected with his mentor from Austin, a retired venture capitalist named Robert, who lived in a ranch house outside San Antonio. He started attending the weekly entrepreneur meetups at 1871, the startup hub in the merchandise mart, not to pitch, but to listen. Pillar 4. Physical discipline. The body is the vehicle, Julia said on day 18, as they climbed the stairs of Soldier Field at dawn, the empty stadium echoing with their footsteps. Every successful American I know treats their body with respect, not vanity, respect. You don't need to be an athlete. You need to move, to sleep, to eat food that fuels rather than depletes. When your body is strong, your mind is sharp. David started meal prepping on Sundays, filling his tiny Wicker Park kitchen with vegetables from the Green City Market in Lincoln Park. He slept 8 hours a night, which meant being in bed by 9:30 p.m., which meant no more late-night Netflix binges. He lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, but more importantly, he gained something he'd forgotten existed: energy. Pillar 5. Evening reflection. "The day isn't over when you leave work," Julia said on day 24, as they sat on the steps of the Art Institute, watching tourists photograph the bronze lions. Successful Americans end their days with intention. Review what went well. Acknowledge what didn't. Forgive yourself. Plan tomorrow. Then let it go. Sleep is not an escape. It's preparation. David started a nightly ritual. 10 minutes of reading, 5 minutes of gratitude journaling, and 1 minute of visualization. Imagining the life he was building, the company he would start, the man he was becoming. But it was on day 27 that everything changed. Yes. Chapter 4, The Secret. They were running along the lakefront, the Chicago skyline blazing with autumn color, when David finally asked the question that had been burning in him for weeks. "Julia," he said, panting slightly, "why do you do this? Really? You're a multimillionaire. You could be anywhere in the world. Why meet a failed entrepreneur on a frozen beach at 5 a.m.? Julia slowed to a walk. They were near the museum campus, the shed aquarium gleaming in the morning light, the Field Museum's neoclassical columns rising like a temple to human achievement. She was quiet for so long that David thought she wouldn't answer. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. It showed a young woman, maybe 25, standing on a beach that looked like this one, holding a notebook, smiling at the camera with an innocence that made David's heart ache. She looked like Julia, but softer, less guarded. Her name was Claire, Julia said, her voice barely audible over the lake wind. She was my sister. She died 3 years ago. Overdose. Heroin. Found in an alley behind a bar in Wicker Park, not 3 blocks from your apartment. David felt the world tilt. Julia, I'm so sorry. She was brilliant, Julia continued, as if he hadn't spoken. Graduated top of her class from Northwestern. Had a job offer from Google. But she got involved with the wrong people, made the wrong choices, and when her startup failed, her first company, a social media app, she couldn't handle it. She spiraled, and I wasn't there. I was in New York, closing a Series B funding round, thinking I had all the time in the world to help her. She turned to face him, and David saw that her eyes were wet. I found her journals after she died. She'd been waking up at 5 a.m. for months, trying to turn her life around. She'd discovered these habits, these pillars, on her own. She was fighting so hard, David. She was fighting so hard, and she was so alone. And I wasn't there. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so vulnerable it seemed impossible from the woman who commanded boardrooms. So I started the 5 a.m. club. Not for Claire. It's too late for Claire. But for the people like her, the people like you. The ones who are one bad decision away from giving up, who need someone to show up for them before the sun rises. Because I wasn't there for my sister, but I can be here for you. I can be here for anyone who has the courage to show up. David looked at this extraordinary woman, this titan of industry who carried her sister's ghost like a secret weight, and felt something shift inside him. Not pity, not even gratitude. Something deeper. Connection. Connection. Julia, he said, and his voice was steady. I'm going to build something again. Not because I want to be rich, not because I want to prove the doubters wrong, but because I want to honor what you've given me. I want to help people the way you've helped me. I want to build something that matters. Julia smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I know you are, she said. I knew it the moment I saw you standing on that beach, looking like a man who'd forgotten how to hope. Because hope isn't something you find, David. It's something you practice. And you've been practicing every morning for 27 days. She reached into her other pocket and pulled out an envelope. What's this? An introduction, she said, to Robert Kincaid, a venture capitalist in San Francisco. He's looking to invest in wellness startups. I told him about your idea, an app that pairs mentors with people struggling with failure, based on the 5 a.m. club model. He wants to meet you next week. David stared at the envelope, then at Julia, then at the city rising around them. The city of big shoulders, of dreamers and builders, of Americans who refuse to stay down. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, Julia said, starting to jog again. Just keep showing up. That's all any of us can do. Chapter 5. The Truth. The night before David was supposed to fly to San Francisco, he got a text from Julia. Meet me at Navy Pier, 5 a.m. I have something to tell you. He arrived early, 4:45 a.m., because successful people are early, and found her standing at the end of the pier, looking out at the dark water. The Ferris wheel was silent. The carnival games shuttered. The tourist shops locked tight. It was just the two of them and the vast, breathing lake. Julia, she turned, and in the dim light, she looked exhausted. Not physically, spiritually, as if she'd been carrying a weight too heavy for any one person. I lied to you, she said. David felt his stomach drop. About what? About everything. About why I started the 5 a.m. club. About Claire. She laughed, but it was bitter, broken. Claire isn't dead, David. She's alive. She's in rehab in Phoenix, Arizona. She's been there for 6 months and she's doing well. But she doesn't want anything to do with me. She says I abandoned her when she needed me most. And she's right. I did. David stepped closer, confused, hurt, but somehow not angry. Then why? Because I needed to believe in something, Julia said, her voice cracking. Because my company is failing. Because my investors are pulling out. Because I'm about to lose everything I built, and I needed to remember why I built it in the first place. I needed to believe that these habits, these pillars, these morning rituals, I needed to believe they actually mattered, that they could save someone, even if they couldn't save me. She turned to face him fully, and in the pre-dawn darkness, David saw the truth. Julia Brennan, the woman who'd taught him to hope, was as lost as he'd ever been. "I used you," she whispered. "I used your pain to feel purposeful. I'm so sorry." The wind whipped across the pier, cold and relentless. David thought of the 30 days they'd spent together. The runs, the conversations, the moments of genuine human connection. He thought of the man he'd been and the man he was becoming, and he realized something that made him want to laugh and cry at the same time. Julia hadn't used him, she'd saved him, and in the process he'd saved her too. "Julia," he said, taking her hands in his. They were cold, trembling. "I don't care why you started. I don't care if your sister is in Phoenix or on the moon. What you gave me was real. What I feel right now, grateful, hopeful, alive, that's real. And you know what? You're not failing. You're here. At 5 a.m. on a pier, in the cold, still trying, still showing up. That's not failure. That's courage." Julia looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her face shifted. The armor cracked. The executive disappeared. And what was left was just a woman, exhausted and afraid, and desperately human. "I don't know how to fix my company," she admitted. "Then don't fix it alone," David said. "Let me help. Let me be your 5 a.m. club. Let me show up for you the way you showed up for me." And then, because the sun was rising over Lake Michigan, because they'd both been through too much to pretend anymore, and because sometimes the most important moments happen when you're not looking, David kissed her. It wasn't movie perfect. Their noses bumped. Julia's coffee thermos dug into his ribs. The wind blew her hair into his mouth. But it was real. It was human. It was two broken people finding wholeness in each other's brokenness. When they finally pulled apart, the sky was blazing with sunrise, and the city was waking up around them. "So," Julia said, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright with something that might have been hope. "What now?" David grinned. "Now? Now we go to San Francisco. We pitch your investors, we save your company, and then," he took her hand, "we build something together, something that helps people remember they're not alone. Because that's what success really is, isn't it? Not money, not fame, just showing up for each other day after day until the dawn breaks." Epilogue, 1 year later. The offices of Dawn, the mentorship app that connected struggling entrepreneurs with successful Americans willing to wake up early, occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in Fulton Market. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see all of Chicago, the lake, the skyline, the endless possibility. David stood at the window, watching the sunrise, a cup of coffee in his hand. Behind him, Julia was on a video call with their new office in Austin, Texas, where they'd just hired their 50th employee. "David," she called out, "the San Francisco team wants to know if we're still doing the 5 a.m. stand-ups." He turned and smiled at the woman who'd changed his life, the woman who was now his partner in every sense of the word. "Tell them absolutely. Some traditions you don't mess with." She grinned and went back to her call. David looked out at the city, at the lake where he'd found a dead man and a living hope, at the beaches where he'd learned to run again, at the piers where he'd learned to love. He thought about the habits that had saved him, the sacred hour, the deep work, the relationships, the physical discipline, the evening reflection. He thought about the thousands of Americans waking up right now in New York and Los Angeles and Houston and Atlanta, opening their Dawn apps, connecting with mentors, choosing to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. He thought about Julia's sister, Claire, now 6 months sober and working as a counselor at a rehab center in Phoenix. He thought about Rosa from the coffee shop, who'd used the 5 a.m. habits to open her own bakery in Pilsen. He thought about Robert from San Antonio, who'd become their first investor and their fiercest advocate. And he thought about the truth that Julia had taught him, the truth that every successful American eventually learns. Success isn't a destination, it's a practice. It's waking up every morning and choosing to be better than you were yesterday. It's showing up when you don't feel like it. It's building habits so strong that they carry you through the storms. The sun was fully up now, painting the city in gold. David finished his coffee, grabbed his notebook, and walked to Julia's desk. "Ready?" he asked. She ended her call and stood, taking his hand. "Ready?" Together, they walked to the elevator, ready to face another day, another challenge, another chance to change the world, one morning at a time. Closing note. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that small habits can lead to extraordinary lives, that showing up matters more than being perfect, and that every sunrise is a second chance, then I want you to know something. You're not alone. Millions of Americans are waking up right now, choosing to build better lives through simple, powerful daily habits. The 5 a.m. Club isn't about waking up early. It's about waking up intentionally. It's about owning your morning so you can own your life. Start tomorrow. Start small. Write down 3 things you're grateful for. Move your body for 20 minutes. Reach out to one person who matters. Read something that challenges you. Reflect on your day before you sleep. These aren't just habits, they're the building blocks of the life you deserve. Good luck. You've got this. And remember, every successful American you admire started exactly where you are right now, at the beginning, with nothing but a choice and a sunrise. Stay with us on this channel, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join our community of dreamers, doers, and dawn chasers. Because the best stories aren't the ones we read, they're the ones we live. See you at 5 a.m. The end.